It's December 20th, 8:24 p.m. This is titled, Why Are These the End Times? There are any number of things that identify this as the end of days. Paul wrote a list of them in 2 Timothy 3. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. For of this sort are they which creep into houses and lead captive silly women laden with sins, led away with divers lusts, ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Now as Jannes and Jambres withstood Moses, so do these also resist the truth. Men of corrupt minds, reprobate concerning the faith. The world today is filled with madmen and silly women living inside a global virtual media madhouse of pathological lying and propaganda. Entertainment entails creating a transient high or thrill-filled euphoric state. Art has become entertainment, and entertainment has become news. Art is always new, pushing the limits of existential absurdity to ever greater heights. Art and religion and entertainment and headline news are conjoined together in free fall into a cultural abyss of hedonism with no moral constraints or restraints anywhere in sight. In fact, there's little notion of what morality might even mean today, outside of a one-line slogan printed on a t-shirt or coffee mug. People need to be flattered and drowned in phony love talk, along with joining one or another team where they call for the extermination of their enemies. America is in a civil war without recognizing it because it's in its death throes, committing suicide, and planning on taking as many other people into eternity as possible in a final mad Götterdämmerung. It's the German word for apocalypse. Germany was a purportedly Christian country, and they entered the Second World War with its supposedly high culture. By comparison, what exists in America today is more a kind of Twitter or Facebook Christianity, social network emoticons and disconnected cyber phantoms in Plato's cyber cafe. One dictionary definition of morality reads, principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong, or good and bad behavior. The Internet Oxford Language Dictionary tells us it's a particular system of values and principles of conduct, especially one held by a specified person or society. The example they use is, quote, a bourgeois morality. I begin to think that the Internet is just AI with a sense of ironic humor. Bourgeois morality has long ago ceased to exist. It was beaten to death by the artistic avant-garde over a century ago, and the beating continues right up to the present. In other words, human beings no longer possess any kind of morality, and one has to go back to the early 20th century prior to World War I in an imaginary time capsule to see what it might have looked like were it not covered in the Victorian hypocrisy that spelled the end of Christianity as the glue that had been holding civilization together. There's a reason Stanley Kubrick based his final film, Eyes Wide Shut, on a novel set in early 20th century Freudian Vienna. The film explores the world of contemporary Freemasonic practices in upstate New York and relates them to the Freud of Vienna and Wittgenstein in Vienna and Gustav Klimt and Egon Schiele's kind of what has to be looked at as pornography and was looked at as pornography rightly by the censors, trying to keep it out of other countries that still had a form of bourgeois morality, where emaciated looking underage women in garters and rouge nipples and whatnot were seen as stroke material, which is what it is. What all of the censorship being repealed by the Supreme Court just allowed a floodgate of the Marquis de Sade and every other form of debauchery. It was seen as healthy and getting rid of our repressed demons, I guess. If you let them loose, just bring them up into the open and they'll take over the rest of the world and your mind and everything else. As we see that all recurring now in the present, were anyone able to pull their eyes away from their movie screens. Reality has ceased to exist. The House of Habsburg was the seat of the Holy Roman Empire from 1440 until 1740. The coat of arms features an upright red beast wearing a crown. The collapse of the Habsburg monarchy was the end of the reign of the monarchs over Europe. Tsar Nicholas and Empress Alexandra's brutal murders by the Bolsheviks, with the last Russian royal Anastasia being bludgeoned to death with rifle butts and stabbed with bayonets, spelling the end of even the notion of Christ being allowed to exist in any socialist state. After their murder, we can look at the actions of Marx's comrades to see exactly what kind of people communist revolutionaries really are. The disposal of the bodies was a gruesome muddle. They were taken to an abandoned mine shaft in a truck, and their clothes were burned on a bonfire before their naked corpses were dropped into a pool of water at the bottom of the shaft. Grenades were dropped into the shaft in an attempt to collapse it. Having failed at this, the murderers moved the bodies to a different shaft where sulfuric acid was used to destroy the faces and prevent recognition. These are children and teenagers. The second shaft also turned out to be inadequate, so they dug a deep grave and the corpses were buried in it on July 19th. We have to ask why the bodies were stripped before being dumped into a shaft where they were to be buried forever. There's the description of their deaths after they were told to dress up and come downstairs because they were going to be picked up by the Soviet to be moved to another location. They were fully and properly dressed, the monarchs and their family, and told to wait in a room. Suddenly, the head of the band of executioners, a man named Yurovsky, burst into the room. Yurovsky, with his Cheka squad, this is the secret police, armed with revolvers, told the prisoners they had been sentenced to death and shot Nicholas dead on the spot. The other guards immediately opened such a hail of fire that some of them were wounded in it. Tsarina Alexandra, Olga, Tatiana, and Marie all fell dead, as did 3 of the servants. The 4th, the maid's Anna Demidova, was sliced to pieces by bayonet thrusts. The terrified Tsarevich, that's the young son of Nicholas and Alexandra, spattered with his father's blood, was shot, bayoneted, and finally finished off with 2 shots from Yurovsky. Anastasia, as I said, the last Romanov alive at that point, was bludgeoned with rifle butts and stabbed with their bayonets. What few to almost no historians I'm aware of want to acknowledge today, because the vast majority are leftists and approve of this, is that these barbaric murders of the Catholic monarchs were satanic in origin and stemmed from Marx, Engels, and Lenin's satanic beliefs and practices. And the bodies were stripped and the corpses are desecrated. That's why they had to be sliced up and murdered and poured sulfuric acid and cover up these crimes. But crimes like this don't get covered up. Their corpses scream for revenge to a just God. And those who aren't leftists don't want to acknowledge this either, because their own military, our military, has committed equally barbaric war crimes, not against royal families, but against impoverished peasants. For example, in Vietnam, including unarmed women and children, no different from the poor Romanov children as human beings and as children of God. The Christian existentialist poet T.S. Eliot wrote in the early 20th century that the world would end in a whimper and not a bang. I think that he was envisioning something like what we see today, human beings caught up in childish, superficial trivia and gossip. In one of his poems, there's a line about women coming and going through the rooms, speaking of Michelangelo. A short century later, Michelangelo has been replaced by Banksy and Keith Haring. St. Peter's Church is no more than a tourist destination, with crowds viewing Michelangelo's Pieta from behind bulletproof glass and worshiping Pachamama, Buddha, Mohammed, or Shiva with the self-proclaimed incarnation of God on earth, Pope Francis radiating love next to Comrade Xi and the Ayatollahs. The church today, the so-called Christian church, Catholic church, Protestant church, you name it, what does it have to do with Jesus Christ of Nazareth, one wonders? And when is anybody going to acknowledge all of these crimes? And when is anybody going to acknowledge the Biden, the Catholic Bidens, and the Catholic Pelosi's, and the Catholic whomevers are nothing of the sort, nor are the Protestants. This holy roller freak show, the drag queen events, and the dancing naked in the bush of the holy roller Burning Man, or whatever that's all about, is obviously, it's about the worship of the pagan gods, the reincarnation of the illuminated Egyptian pharaohs, or Quetzalcoatl plumed serpents, or rain gods, or Tlaloc. Out with Rick Warren and these people, what they're gonna, pray for the rain god to send rain or control the thunder. It's all paganism. America is under the wrath of God, and the murder rate is going through the ceiling. The drug abuse, the drug overdoses, the sex slavery, the grooming that the left seems to think doesn't exist. And the right doesn't think, or either the right doesn't think it exists or doesn't care if it exists. They want to pretend nothing is going on in America except, a new revival. A new revival of what? A new revival of Lucifer. Lucifer is in the White House. Lucifer is in the military industrial complex. He's in the prisons. He's in all the drug cartels. He's in all of this debauchery and lust. It's not lust of the flesh. It's alone. It's lust for money. It's envy. It's gluttony. It's avarice like nobody's ever seen before outside of the Roman baths in Caligula's day. And yet we prance around as if we're the very essence of kindness and compassion and love and while there's very little but a desecration of everything sacred. And to be reassured that you're going to heaven by pastors and priests just because that makes you feel good and makes them feel good and opens up the teardrops and the prayer and crying. God's not listening to that. He doesn't listen anymore. He's not listening to heathens, just as he says, praying the Gentiles, vain repetition, and mockery everywhere. It's this. I can't even watch it anymore. I cannot bear to watch movies or even listen to the music that's coming out of the radios. That's coming. Everything is going to end. All of this party scene is going to reverse itself. The people that are now on the top are going to be on the bottom, and the people on the bottom are going to be on the top. And that doesn't mean they're going to lord it over everybody. It means they're going to survive this death spiral into the abyss. There is a God and there is a devil. There's the dark forces and there are the forces of God and forces of light. This is scripture, Matthew, the King James Version, Matthew 20. And it's verse 16. So the last shall be first, and the first last, for many be called, but few chosen. And Jesus, going up to Jerusalem, took the 12 disciples apart in the way and said unto them, Behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man shall be betrayed unto the chief priests and unto the scribes, and they shall condemn him to death, and shall deliver him to the Gentiles to mock, and to scourge, and to crucify him. And the third day he shall rise again. Then came to him the mother of Zebedee's children with her sons, worshiping him, and desiring a certain thing of him. And he said unto her, What wilt thou? She saith unto him, Grant that these my two sons may sit, the one on thy right hand and the other on the left, in thy kingdom. But Jesus answered and said, Ye know not what ye ask. Are ye able to drink of the cup that I shall drink of? And to be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? They say unto him, We are able. And he saith unto them, Ye shall drink indeed of my cup, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. But to sit on my right hand and on my left is not mine to give, but it shall be given to them for whom it is prepared of my Father. And when the 10 heard it, they were moved with indignation against the 2 brethren. But Jesus called them unto him and said, Ye know that the princes of the Gentiles exercise dominion over them, and they that are great exercise authority upon them. But it shall not be so among you, but whosoever will be great among you, let him be your minister. And whosoever will be chief among you, let him be your servant. Even as the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister and to give his life a ransom for many. And as they departed from Jericho, a great multitude followed him. And behold, 2 blind men sitting by the wayside, when they heard that Jesus passed by, cried out, saying, Have mercy on us, O Lord, thou Son of David. And the multitude rebuked them, because they should hold their peace. But they cried the more, saying, Have mercy on us, O Lord, thou Son of David. And Jesus stood still and called them, and said, What will ye that I shall do unto you? And they say unto him, Lord, that our eyes may be opened. So Jesus had compassion on them and touched their eyes, and immediately their eyes received sight, and they followed him. And what does that tell us? That it's not too late for anyone who's blind and living by the wayside and being rebuked and being spat upon and being ridiculed and being mocked for not being part of the general celebration of Christian virtue, as it were. That Jesus is listening. He's waiting to hear from them. He's waiting to hear from anyone who is alone in this society of madness and depravity and has lost hope. That there's always a hope with Jesus. There's always, the Son of God is always listening and waiting for somebody to ask. And the door will be opened. But as he says also, that you have to pick up your cross, that it isn't a matter of simply saying I'm faithful and then going on with the crowd in celebration and movie watching and display, idol display, and false belief and false worship. The relationship with Jesus is all important because Jesus is the path, he's the doorway to the Father. The Father isn't listening. You have to go through the Son. And particularly now in these days when we're so afflicted by delusions of grandeur that we're going to conquer space and we're going to conquer, become immortals, and we're going to have endless prosperity, and God loves us, and all we have to do is say a rosary and be forgiven, and there's really no sacrifice involved. That there's this endless love that pours forth regardless of our behavior and regardless of our national disgrace, because this is a disgraceful society. I'm sure there have been others, but I can't imagine. I mean, I'm just comparing this society today to what it was in the 50s. It's unimaginable that anybody in the 50s of I Love Lucy and Leave It to Beaver and this kind of innocence, though there was plenty of under the surface. It was kept under the surface. It was not paraded around in churches, for one thing. And all of this slippage into complete depravity has been sanctioned by the Pope in Rome, of all people. Well, isn't that a surprise? It's not to me, because I grew up in the Catholic Church. And it's not a surprise in the Anglican Church, because I was in the Anglican and Christian fundamentalist when I was in the 70s. And this was a sex cult. I wasn't involved in the sex cult. I had no idea who these people were until I found out. So this has been going on, at top speed for 60 or 70 years now. And we're at the end of the road, so I'm recommending and encouraging people to turn away, turn away from the broad path. God bless all of you. I pray for everyone. I pray for my dear loved ones. Pray for everybody who's lost and who's longing and who's hurting, that they will go to pray to Jesus and submit their will to His and stop this vanity.